Hi, Isabel.
Hey Claire, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good.
Good. Welcome to the Clarity Conversations. I'm very excited to have you as my very first guest. And welcome to the audience who's watching tonight. Very excited to be doing this very first episode. And full disclosure, Isabelle Steichen, we have the same last name. She is my cousin from Luxembourg. But lest you worry that this is going to be a series of family interviews, I can assure you that the reason I chose Isabelle is that she is such an incredible example of a millennial free agent. And throughout the conversation tonight, I think you'll see that she is so on top of career. She learns from every job she has, and she's really continually working towards finding her bliss, understanding what motivates her and what keeps her going. So very quickly about Isabelle. She grew up in Luxembourg. She studied in Paris for college and then did a year abroad at Hamilton College in the United States. And there she met her husband, Noah. Together they have a podcast and an online presence in the vegan world called theplantiful.com. But that's not all she does, and that's actually a sideline because her main work has been working for a lot of startups in the tech space and in the online space. So, Isabelle, thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so looking forward to digging in with some questions. And I know you've thought about these, so thank you for doing that because it gives us a little bit of guideline there. So, anything you want to say before we begin?
No, I'm just excited to, I think about my career and my job a lot, and I think about my passion projects a lot. It's just kind of what I do all day. So I'm excited to be here and to share some of that stuff.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I will point out that what I love about our conversations is that you're at a place that I was 20 years ago. And so it's amazing that you're such a source to me for how things have changed, how they've stayed the same, and what young people are going through today in terms of career. So let's go. First question. What clarity do you have in this moment about your career?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. When I was preparing a little bit for the interview, I was thinking about just, what that even represents, clarity. And I realized it's not really an end goal, it's more like a journey. And I feel like I've had moments of clarity all throughout my career. And, I started working in the US in 2013. And I think the first moment of clarity I had was when I was with a nonprofit and realized that I really loved the mission, but I felt unfulfilled by the structure and the work environment. It was just very slow pace. I couldn't see the exact impact of my work. And so I decided to switch and go to a startup, which is pretty much the exact opposite. And I joined this early stage venture-backed company.
Smiling because I know you and you're such a go-getter that I could imagine the pace of a startup of a nonprofit would be different.
Yep. Yeah, totally. I mean, and I felt honestly, I felt a little bit, I was thinking, am I ungrateful because I have this job at this really good company and I had gotten a grad degree in urban planning and it was related to that. And I felt like I shouldn't complain, right? I'm in exactly the career and the job that I should be in. But I think also a piece of me was coming to this with my European mindset. And I thought, where else would I go and join a startup than in the United States? I'm already here. I might as well take advantage and just try it out because I'm so young and I'm at the beginning of my career. And I've always kind of went from one thing to the next school-wise. So I realized it was time to explore a little. And so that was definitely a moment of clarity. Throughout my work in startups, I've had various moments of clarity. One of them being that I realized after my second job that it wasn't only the content of my work that was important, but the people were really crucial. And I I, at the time, was with a company that was based in the UK, so I didn't really have coworkers that were with me all the time. I was starting to build a small team here in New York, and it just didn't feel, I don't know, it just didn't feel like like a work community. And I felt kind of detached from the people. And I liked the content of my work, but I didn't like the fact that I didn't have people around me that were inspiring me every day. So then I had this moment of clarity. Okay, it's not just about the content, and it's not just about the pace, it's also about the people. And so I ended up joining a really incredible company run by two women, and loved the team, such a humble, smart, experienced team. So I feel like every time I got like one step closer to my goal, and I had a little bit more clarity. And right now, most recently, the clarity that I had was, well, it's good to have a good team. It's good to be in a startup. That's all important. But I also want to work on stuff that personally fulfills me, which is, the vegan world that I had always been working on as a side hustle. And so most recently, I actually joined a startup accelerator as one of their in-house consultants to work on a vegan project. So I'm super excited about that. And that's kind of like the recent highlight and moment of clarity.
Great. And what I know from talking to you is that this is a moment of clarity that feels, fingers crossed, like something very exciting, and something that I'm a big advocate of is that if you know yourself, and if you're persistent and you work hard towards what you want to do, sometimes you just get incredibly lucky and it falls into place. So let's keep fingers crossed. One thing I noticed that you said that I'm just going to point out, because it happens a lot when I work with people, is that you said something about when you were at the nonprofit, you said, is it me? Am I being spoiled? Mm-hmm. Because I don't like this. And I think that can be a common feeling where people think, there must be something wrong with me. This is such a great job. I get to work in New York City, and that can sometimes get in the way of growth and progress. So just an interesting point. So then here's a question. What do you do when you need to gain clarity about career and what's next?
I talked to you, Claire.
I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, the truth is, what I've also learned, the best piece of having worked for this nonprofit was I had an incredible boss at the time who was also an immigrant like myself. He was French, and he moved to the US 20 years ago. And he very much became a mentor. And I realized, we left on really good terms. I remember the day I told him I didn't want to work there anymore. He was kind of devastated, but he also said to me, I totally understand. And so I felt like there was a lot of trust, and he has been a great, mentor, but also a person who I could talk to and ask for advice. And honestly, I feel similarly about you. You're obviously family, but you also do this for work. And so it's always felt like I could turn to you and talk to you about stuff. And especially because when I first moved here, I didn't really know that much about the American, job market and work ethics and all of that. I came from Europe, and things are very different. And so I think the big thing to get clarity, one, I would say, is find a mentor as early as you can in your career and keep that relationship. Even in moments where everything is going well, you should talk to your mentor about stuff, because it's important that you don't just talk to a person for help when everything is on fire. So yes. I'd say that's definitely number one. The other thing sounds a little cheesy, but I like to listen to my intuition and check in with myself. And I think that I realized that money, for example, for me is not really a driver. Money, I see it from a very utilitarian perspective. I need money to live in New York and pay my bills. And it's nice to have a little more for comfort. But my goal is not to accumulate money. And so I'm asking myself, what is my goal? My goal is to work in a field, in a job where I'm making a difference. And that sounds vague, but for me, it's the vegan world, the environmental work. I really care about that. And so the other tool that I use when I think about getting clarity is I kind of double check what am I doing right now? And am I feeling like I'm getting closer to this goal of making a real positive impact on the environment and on animals? And so that's definitely something that I like to do when I feel maybe unhappy or unsettled. I try to check in with my intuition and ask myself, does this really feel right?
Mm-hmm. And wow, there's so much to respond to in that. One thing that you said that I also notice a lot is the sometimes waiting. You know, you said, am I getting closer to the goal that I love?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can be hard to know, do I have to work through a few difficult years before I get to where I'm going? Or is this job a dead end?
Mm-hmm.
And I really should leave, and it's not going to get me where I'm going. So cool. Very good.
I think that's an interesting one, actually, if I can jump in on that. I think that's really tough, especially in startups, because things are changing super quickly. So I went from a nonprofit where I don't think they had ever fired anyone there to a startup where literally my friends and coworkers were getting fired left and right. And so I went from a super stable, slow-paced environment to a crazy, fast-paced environment. And I think it depends on the environment. Also, to respond to your question of should I wait or, should I work through hard stuff? I think in a startup, things go way faster and you just do things so much more quickly and you get so much more responsibility faster that it might be more normal to leave your job earlier. If if you want to work in the nonprofit world, it's different because there's a little bit more of a clear trajectory. And, startups are very risky places because they raise money, but they could be out of money tomorrow. And that's not really the case with most nonprofits. So I think it's important to also kind of see what work environment you work in. I'm not saying, if you work for a startup, you should quit your job every 6 months, but I think it's more normal that there's a little bit more turnover than in other work environments.
Well, and the turnover, you bring up something interesting as well. Part of the reason it's good if you connect with someone who would make a good mentor for you, don't feel like they have to be at your current job. Right. And people talk today about this idea of having a board of directors, but the more people you can have that you trust and that have a little bit more experience than you do, it's important to hang on to those people because everybody's job hopping these days.
Yes, that's actually so true. I mean, now that you bring this up, it reminds me of my third mentor, who is this woman who is, I would say, 8 years older than me and who I met at Kitchen Surfing, my first startup job. So that was 5 years ago and I've kept her. And the funny thing is now the client that I'm consulting for has their office in the same building as her. So I see her for lunch, once a week now. So it definitely is, what you're saying is really important, is that to find, and I think I really like doing that, find good people at my jobs and become friends with them and stay friends with them because, it's worth investing into human relationships.
Yep. Okay, good. So let's shift a little bit into this idea of the free agent and the free agency energy. And as I was thinking of what to ask you here, what occurred to me is that the free agent is sort of in charge, right? They own their destiny. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the questions are, what do you feel in charge of? Or when do you feel in charge? What are the circumstances that make you feel in charge? And then when do you not feel in charge? And that's where I'm going to ask you to share with us a little, area for improvement of Isabelle Steichen. When do you feel in charge?
I think I feel in charge. I think in startups in general, it's an interesting contradiction because on one hand, there's a ton of pressure because a lot of these companies raise a lot of money and you want to get it right. But on the other hand, I've learned that if you just work hard and, try to come up with creative solutions, that's the most that you can do because nobody has the answers in a startup because nobody has done it before. So I feel very much in charge when someone throws a problem at me. I feel like I can find a creative way to deal with this. I can use my brain, no matter what I studied in school or in grad school, it doesn't matter. I learn how to think and be creative. And so I can solve problems. So I feel very much in charge of that. And I feel very much in charge most of the time of my career, in the sense that I often remind myself that when I go to my employer, or at the times where I was working for startups, that, you know, it's a choice. They made the choice to hire me, but I'm also making the choice to invest myself into the company. And in startups, oftentimes that means a strong emotional investment, because the companies that I joined were very small at the beginning. There were 6 or 7 people. So you sit next to each other in like a tiny apartment that is your office. So it's very much almost like a relationship. It's like you choose every day to participate in this. So I feel very in charge of that. I do find that there are moments where I feel less in charge, especially when I first moved to this country. I felt, you know, I didn't have an American degree. I had studied abroad at an American school, but I really didn't, you know, I didn't have like Harvard or Columbia. I had a French school on my diploma, and nobody knows, you know, what this school is all about. So I felt kind of, yeah, I felt like I wasn't in charge of that. And I had to prove myself extra hard to show that my education was equivalent to an American degree. The other thing that I've noticed, and I think I'm thinking about this more because of the current political climate, being a woman, you know, in the startup world, it's interesting because I for a really long time thought I don't really experience any disadvantage, because I have 2 brothers and my parents raised us in the same way, and they invested the same resources in all of us. They gave us all an undergrad and a grad school degree. They, you know, I played with Legos when I was 10 because my brothers like to play with Legos. So I never felt that I was different, and my parents never treated me differently. And I kind of convinced myself that there is no problem with gender. But then I look around myself in the tech startup world, and I see only men, and I see all the investors, and it's only men. And I hear, you know, female founders who say they are pregnant, but they don't want to tell anyone because it might lower their chances of getting an investment, which would never happen to a man. And so I see that as a young person in my career, and I think, oh my God, you know, there is definitely a problem still with gender, and especially in the tech startup world. And so I guess that's another moment where I feel like I'm not in charge. I have a hard time, want to make a difference, but I don't really know how.
And that's a great question, because then if you feel like there might be limits one day, how do you maintain that free agency?
Yeah, I think honestly, I feel like it's a little bit of, I think I've had a lot of moments where I got disappointed by an outcome of something that I expected to turn out differently. You know, I've been working on my vegan business for a while, and at times had tried to raise capital for that, and I would hear, you know, rejection and people telling me you don't have enough experience, or people, you know, probably not trusting me as much because I'm a woman. And so I think every time that happens, I'm sad for a day, and then I just get up the next day and I'm like, it's a numbers game. That's what I've learned. It's a numbers game. And you know, it's the more you throw at the wall, the higher the chance that something is going to stick. And I just feel like right now I have so much energy in my life that I'm ready to throw as much at the wall as I can and just keep working at it. I think what I remind myself is, I know it's not personal because I'm trying to be always professional, work hard, show up, do my job. I'm not trying to cut corners, so I can't take blame if it doesn't always work out. And I try to remind myself, and that's easier now because right now I'm happy in my state. But I know that sometimes it can be hard and emotional, and you can doubt yourself. But I think it's really about like keeping perspective and reminding yourself that it's oftentimes luck plays a big role as well.
Yeah. And I don't want to go too far down the path of resilience, because that is another whole big topic and we don't want to go on for too long. But what you're pointing to is resilience, and people talk about grit and tenacity and perseverance. And people talk these days a lot about that millennials they studied to perfection and they got good grades all the time, and that it's really hard to understand that moment where there's a little failure or a substantial failure, and you don't know if you're all wrong or if it was inevitable. And that can be such a vulnerable and delicate moment to recover from.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, the earlier it happens, I myself was fired from my job when I was 30, which is now a badge of honor, but at the time it was really tough, and a very difficult thing to recover from. But wow, resilience, particularly in today's world of like disruption,
Mm-hmm.
is really important.
It's actually funny you say that. I remember my oldest brother telling me in high school, one time I came home with a bad grade and I was crying, and it was probably not even that bad, but like it wasn't what I expected. He said to me something like, you just got to get used to this. Like, this happens in life all the time. Like, you're going to get bad grades. And the reason why you're upset is because you usually get good grades. So just get with it. And I remember that. And it's so true. I mean, it's exactly what you just said. It's the best is if you experience these situations early. I think the other piece is the hubris piece. Like, sometimes my generation thinks we are, more advanced than we are, because we are the generation that raises money at age 28 and, runs companies with no experience. And I've experienced that as an employee, and looking at people who are a few years older than me, who don't know what they are doing, but are pretending. And I think sometimes it's good to be shaken a little and be reminded, hey, you're like so young, you don't know everything, and you will fail. You just have to keep getting up and trying it again.
Yep. Great. What 2 pieces of advice would you give to people wanting to go to the next level in their career?
So one piece, I think one big piece is take risks. So I took a big risk moving to this country. I had a perfectly nice European education that would have worked super well if I wanted to work for the government in Luxembourg or in France and have like a safe, comfortable life. I chose to move here. I met, my husband in school, but also I fell in love with New York City and the energy. But I also knew that I was kind of on my own and had to figure it out. But I don't know. I felt like, it's a short life. So I might as well try and see if it works out. So I think that taking risk is really important. And I actually recently started thinking even more about this. My grandmother passed away at age 97 2 years ago. And I thought, she like survived like the Second World War, and she ran away from the Germans on a bike with her not even married husband yet. And like all these stories, I'm just thinking it's all risk. Like, the reason why she had such an amazing, fulfilled life was because she was just bold and took risks. So I think if you want to take it to the next level, don't be shy. Just try something different. And I think it's easy to get complacent and to feel like you can't do better, or it's safer to stay with a job. I think if you are young, like below like 30, that's where I think you're that's the time when you're getting all this experience, and you can only get it if you take risk. So that's advice number 1. I think advice number 2 is really finding a mentor. And I think that's especially important in my work environment. As I said, in startups, the age range is way lower, and a lot of people don't have that much work experience. So finding someone who you look up to, who you can check in with, I think is a super important thing to have in your back pocket at all times. So, and that definitely helps when you want to take it to the next level.
Cool. And yes, thank you. Thank you for all these questions. And what I will say, I know there's a lot of companies out there where, I don't know if there's that many, but I hear about them and I think it's brilliant, where they do reverse mentoring and they have the 20-somethings teach the older people how to do social media and Instagram and all this cool stuff. So so this is a perfect time to say, go see my website, because Isabelle just redesigned it. But thank you, Isabelle. You are an inspiration to me, and you are my little reverse mentor. You're my mentor and my mentee.
Oh, thank you, Claire.
Thank you for being the first one, and we'll see where the show goes from here. So I will be having a lot of other guests on the show, so please continue to join. And if you're not already on my newsletter, please go to my website, www.clearstrategycoaching.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. You can also schedule a 30-minute appointment with me, or go to the pages that talk about the individual programs, where you'll see a lot more about the free agent solution. All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Isabelle.
Thank you.